Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mirage Studios. What began as a throwaway inside joke between two artists mushroomed into the spine of every TMNT continuity that followed, and it all started with a tax refund and a loan from one of their uncles. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird self-published the first issue in 1984, with zero expectation beyond paying back that family debt, intending the entire project as a single one-shot. Instead, the book found an audience in the exploding underground comic scene and kept going, ultimately running for 3 decades with its final issue published in 2014. The premise was always the same: 4 genetically mutated turtles trained by their own mutated rat sensei Splinter to wage war against the Foot Clan and its leader Oroku Saki, the Shredder. But the execution carried a weight that would gradually disappear from the property: black and white art, a darker tone, and a willingness to engage with the kind of storytelling that most comics of the era wouldn't touch. That tonal commitment earned the series a respect that stretched beyond its own pages and into the independent comics world at large. And then the crossover list arrives, and it is genuinely absurd. This was not a property doing a guest appearance in someone else's book to pad out a crossover issue. Cerebus ran over 300 issues across more than 2 decades and was one of the most commercially successful independent comics of its era. Flaming Carrot, Usagi Yojimbo, Savage Dragon, Spawn, each one of those titles represented serious creative reputations in the independent scene, and every single one of them brought the Turtles into their own worlds. A black and white self-published joke was being treated as peer to the most respected properties in underground comics. Ownership shuffled in 2 major waves before the corporate era took over completely. Kevin Eastman sold his share of the franchise to Peter Laird in 2000, leaving Laird as the sole keeper of the Mirage era vision. 9 years later, in October 2009, Laird sold the entire Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise to Viacom, shifting the property from creator stewardship to corporate ownership in a single transaction. That sale didn't end the comics. IDW Publishing secured the rights to publish a new TMNT series and reprint older comics the following year, in 2011, keeping the Mirage continuity alive in print under new management. The operation that began with 2 artists pooling a tax refund and a family loan officially closed its doors on September 19, 2021, when Mirage Studios was shut down. The timeline from that first photocopied issue to the company's dissolution spans 37 years, a run that no one involved in that original loan transaction could have possibly predicted. What actually sustained the property for that long wasn't a grand business plan or a licensing strategy. It was a tonal specificity that kept readers showing up issue after issue, a darkness that made the comic feel like something you discovered rather than something marketed to you. Subscribe and tell us in the comments which TMNT continuity you think nailed the tone best. Now let's get back into it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1987 TV series. The comic that started as a one-shot funded by a tax refund spawned something far larger and far stranger. An animated series built primarily to sell plastic action figures, helmed by Fred Wolf Films, which operated under the name Murakami Wolf Swenson until 1992. Fred Wolf himself directed the first 6 seasons personally before the show changed hands, and the entire production was a commercial instrument first. Playmates Toys needed a cartoon to make their new toy line move, and the studio built a show around that requirement rather than the other way around. The tonal departure from the source material was immediate and total. Where Mirage Studios leaned into a darker, more grounded sensibility, this adaptation opted for bright comedy, slapstick violence, and a color palette that could best be described as radioactive. Early seasons leaned hardest into the comedy, reducing the Shredder to a buffoon constantly outmaneuvered and harassed by Krang, the giant brain from Dimension X. A tonal choice that essentially made the primary antagonist a supporting player in his own franchise for 7 seasons. The show was also marketed internationally under the name Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, scrubbing the word ninja from the title in certain territories without altering a frame of the actual content. The internal contradictions within that structure eventually forced a course correction. Starting with Season 8, the series underwent a full retool into what fans call the Red Sky years, a darker style anchored by a permanent ruddy sky color scheme that bled into every frame, replacing the bright primary color backgrounds of the earlier seasons. The turtles themselves receive bulkier, less cutesy, character designs that moved them visually closer to their comic book counterparts. It was an attempt to course-correct the tone that had drifted so far from its source, but the change came after 7 seasons of comedy had already defined the property in the public imagination. The entire arc traces back to a single structural fact. This was a half-hour toy commercial that accidentally became a cultural phenomenon, and its creative evolution was dictated by merchandising cycles rather than any consistent authorial vision. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990 film. The 1987 animated series had locked TMNT into Saturday morning television for a generation, with all the tonal constraints that implied. And then this arrived. Released on March 30th, 1990, the film ran 92 minutes, cost $13.5 million to produce, and grossed $202 million at the box office, earning back its budget more than 15 times over. Distributed by New Line Cinema and produced by Golden Harvest Entertainment Company, Limelight Productions, and 888 Productions, it became the first installment in what would become a long-running film series. Directed by Steve Barron from a script by Todd W. Langen and Bobby Herbeck. The film adapted the early Mirage Studios comics while pulling several elements from the animated series airing at the very same time, creating a tonal hybrid no one had attempted before. The Creature Shop built the turtle suits using cutting-edge animatronic technology, and the suits were technically demanding, requiring performers to master complex physical movements. Director Steve Barron made a deliberate creative choice, a darker, moody aesthetic grounded in the comic book look, rather than the bright, rounded style of the cartoon. Judith Hoag played April O'Neil, Elias Koteas played Casey Jones. Both casting decisions pointed towards something more serious than what Saturday morning had trained audiences to expect. The reasonable explanation for the film's success is the simplest one. TMNT was at peak cultural saturation in 1990, and any film with the name attached would have made money regardless of quality. That explanation falls apart on inspection. A $13.5 million budget was not a cash-in budget, it was a restrained one, the kind of spend that requires the film to earn its return on craft and word of mouth rather than marketing force alone. The production represented a genuine creative risk in tone and execution. The $202 million gross was not a franchise inevitability. It demonstrated that TMNT could sustain a live-action presence. The film expanded the property's range of possible expressions. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2003 TV series. This series brought the property back to a darker tone rooted in its comic book origins. Developed by Lloyd Goldfine and based on characters created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, the show premiered on February 8, 2003 as part of Fox's Foxbox programming block and ran through February 28, 2009, a 6-year production run first announced on May 7, 2002, 9 months before a single frame aired. Co-produced by 4Kids Entertainment, making this its first in-house animated production, and franchise creators Mirage Studios, with animation provided by Dong Wu, the series aired on Fox for its first 6 seasons before moving to the CW for its 7th. 4Kids licensed episodes to additional platforms during the run, meaning a portion of the audience was encountering the series on a 3rd channel, while new episodes continued on a 2nd, creating a fragmented viewing window across the franchise's lifespan. Each episode ran 21 to 23 minutes, and the show ran for 7 seasons total, with Season 5 subtitled Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Ninja Tribunal, Season 6 subtitled Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fast Forward, and Season 7 subtitled TMNT Back to the Sewer. Chuck Patton directed Seasons 1 and 2, Roy Burdine directed Seasons 3 through 7. Multiply that out, 155 episodes at 21 to 23 minutes each is roughly 55 to 58 hours of content delivered across 6 years, bouncing between 2 broadcast networks and a 3rd cable channel, with 2 different directors shaping different eras of the story. The series acted as both a revival for a new generation and a return to form by exploring darker storylines drawn from the Mirage comics. The production was a serious structural investment in a single interpretation of TMNT, and it was a bet with real risk. The audience had been raised on the 1987 series' comedy-first approach, and this was asking them to follow the Turtles into territory the original comics had explored, but the cartoon had deliberately avoided. The shift in directors partway through the run, the network change for the final season, and the subtitle shifts between Ninja Tribunal, Fast Forward, and Back to the Sewer all signal a show adjusting its own identity while trying to hold an audience that had grown up on something entirely different. The series completed its full planned run without cancellation. The audience for a darker, more serialized TMNT turned out to be real and large enough to sustain a 7-season commitment across multiple networks. The question that leaves unanswered is whether that audience was new or whether it had been there all along, waiting for someone to take the property seriously. If the 1990 film proved TMNT could hold a darker tone in a single sitting, the 2003 series proved it could sustain one for 6 years. But it also raised a question the franchise has never definitively answered: whether TMNT's identity rests in its comedy roots or in the grittier material the comics always had waiting. TMNT, 2007 film. Forget everything you thought you knew about the so-called rules of Turtle Legacy, because the 2007 film calmly vaporizes the idea that there ever was a consistent law in the first place. This isn't some splinter timeline hiding in the dark. It's a full-throttle animated movie released in 2007 that claims to bridge what came before but dismantles the notion of linear, unmoving canon right under your nose. Start with the credits. Kevin Munro is credited as both director and screenwriter for the feature. Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman, the original creators, are credited for creating the characters. Image Animation Studios produced the animation for the 2007 film. Warner Brothers Pictures distributed the film in the United States. Klaus Badelt composed the music for TMNT, 2007. The film stars Chris Evans, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Mako, Kevin Smith, Patrick Stewart, Ziyi Zhang, and Lawrence Fishburne. TMNT 2007 is an installment with a new screenplay, director, and animation studio. This is a timeline that borrows just enough to whisper about continuity, then burns a new path through the franchise with its production style, its cast, and the way it's distributed. Even the credits become part of the argument. The producers for the movie are Thomas K. Gray, Galen Walker, and Paul Wang. TMNT 2007 was produced by Image Animation Studios and released as a standalone film. Film specialists don't get stuck on simple canon questions. They zero in on why the production company, Image Animation Studios, can create a movie meant to bridge, but one whose every detail shouts reinvention rather than adherence. The film's existence becomes their exhibit A for how Hollywood, especially when animation rights cross to a studio in a different hemisphere, shreds the illusion of contiguous narrative law. Some say you have to see the flick as a bridge. But the evidence stacks higher than that, right down to the bold music switch of Klaus Badelt stepping in. It's a timeline that is conducting its own soundtrack, floating in a strange remix between legacies, and breaking every rule of inherited continuity without apology. TMNT 2007 features new animation by Image, a new cast, and narration by Lawrence Fishburne in a Warner Brothers release. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles IDW Publishing. If the 2007 film was a continuity breaking and reforming in real time, the IDW Publishing series does the opposite. It's an epic scale assertion of permanence, a timeline so dense and persistent the real challenge is to keep up rather than hunt for fractures. The series first launched in August 2011, instantly distinguishing itself as a long-haul contender. Not a mini-series, not a marketing one-off, but the new flagship, and that's the short version. Volume 1 ran from August 2011 to April 2024. The IDW Publishing TMNT comic series is the longest-running continuous TMNT comic in print. As the issues pile up, IDW's timeline transforms sheer volume into its defining feature. It isn't just another branch, it becomes the main artery. In the details, this goes beyond simple persistence. Ongoing is not a marketing slogan, it's the operational law here. Monthly drops, yearly arcs, each minutely chipping away at the old presumption that TMNT has a default state. The publication record is no joke. Volume 1 was released monthly as an ongoing series from August 2011 to April 2024. The IDW TMNT comic series has continued without reboot since its debut, and that is the small version of the problem. Most continuities lose their stakes by fading away or resetting when they get too messy. The IDW timeline does the opposite, compounding details, stacking characters, cementing itself not as a reflection of what came before, but as the foundation future versions have to answer to. The IDW TMNT comic series is recognized for its long duration and number of issues. the IDW Publishing TMNT run is notable for its ongoing publication and major role in the print canon. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2012 TV series. The series arrived as a weekly animated event, landing 3.9 million viewers across its two-part September 2012 premiere. A weekly animated event landing 3.9 million viewers across its two-part September 2012 premiere. A ninjutsu master named Hamato Yoshi and his 4 pet turtles are splashed with Krang mutagen, transforming Yoshi into a rat and the turtles into humanoid teenagers, an origin beaten into the ground by every prior adaptation, yet this version still managed to find new angles inside it. Splinter arrived already a fully trained ninjutsu master, not a mutated house cat who'd picked up moves from television, and the villains weren't limited to the Shredder. The Krang, those surreal brain and tank hybrids from Dimension X, ran the show for the first 2 seasons in a way no TMNT series had committed to before. The debut pulled 3.9 million viewers over its 2-part opening on September 28th and 29th, making it the strongest animated series premiere Nickelodeon had delivered since 2009, and it targeted boys aged 6 to 11 as part of a deliberate network strategy to reboot 2 established brands for a new generation of viewers who had never encountered a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles before. Ant Ward and Andy Suriano developed the series for Nickelodeon, and keeping up with weekly delivery demands a 5-season run required animation production handled by Nickelodeon Animation Studio. The series ran until November 12, 2017, with its final episodes airing on Nicktoons, and moved 7 episodes to Nicktoons, then stretched the last run across another 8-month arc from March through November, closing out the story. That turn was the Tell. The previous sections had either been short, self-contained stories or open-ended comics. The 2012 series was the first TMNT show treated as a 5-year commitment with over 100 episodes planned from the start, serialized enough to sustain a genuine long-term audience. Skeptics will point out that Nickelodeon ended it, that 5 seasons and then cancellation is not a success story. They're not wrong about the ending, but they're wrong about the reason. The series ran for 5 seasons from 2012 to 2017, not a ratings-driven cancellation, and the series was given room to wrap its story on its own terms over the following 8 months. The real proof that this version of the Turtles had earned something rare came from an unexpected direction. The 1987 Shredder and Krang literally fled their own continuity and crossed into the 2012 reality, teaming up with the 2012 Bebop and Rocksteady to launch a cross-dimensional invasion. You don't write that kind of crossover unless you're acknowledging the 2012 series as a legitimate peer to the original. And you certainly don't let Dimension X serve as the shared battlefield if the 2012 Turtles haven't earned the right to stand alongside the 1987 versions in the first place. What this reveals about the franchise as a whole is that TMNT had outgrown the need for a single canon. The 2012 series proved you could build a deep, serious, serialized version of these characters that still hit the same Saturday morning audience as the 1987 show, and you could pull off a crossover acknowledging both as equals without either version losing its identity. The comic had established that TMNT could support multiple conflicting canons. The 2012 show proved that television could sustain that plurality at scale. Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The 2012 series concluded in November 2017, and within weeks had already unveiled a replacement, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, announced in March 2017, developed by Ant Ward and Andy Suriano, with both serving as showrunners and executive producers from the start. The 2012 series had ended its run with a 5-season, 20-episode final arc in a broadcast footprint that stretched across both Nickelodeon and Nicktoons, treating that conclusion as an earned finale. Risei didn't get that same runway or the same farewell. The network targeted the same core demographic of boys aged 6 to 11, but where the 2012 series had delivered over 100 episodes across 5 years, Rise produced 2 seasons and 39 episodes before ending in 2020. Nickelodeon didn't cancel Rise because it failed. They didn't even give it the chance to fail on its own terms, treating the franchise as a revolving door of reboots rather than a narrative worth sustaining. Rise didn't end because the audience left. It ended because Nickelodeon moved on before the audience had a chance to decide. TMNT Adventures, Archie Comics. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures ran for 72 issues published by Archie Comics, debuting in August 1988 and continuing through October 1995, with numerous annuals, specials, and miniseries filling out the run. The series was aimed at a younger audience than other TMNT comics at the time. and it was created by Ryan Brown, Steve Murphy, Kevin Eastman, and Peter Laird, launching as a 3-part miniseries that initially adapted episodes from the 1987 animated television series. By issue 5, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird handed the comic over to Mirage artists Ryan Brown and Stephen Murphy, and under their guidance, the series moved decisively into original storylines, incorporating social and environmentalist themes while introducing new characters that would reshape the supporting cast. Issues 5 through 11 introduced Man Ray, Leatherhead, Wingnut, and Screwloose, who later formed the Mighty Mutanimals, alongside Cuddly the Cowlick, Stump Asteroid with its intergalactic wrestling, the Turtles' wrestling costumes, and a polluted future Earth that showed where unchecked environmental damage could lead. Issues 12 and 13 featured the Turtles recruited by Cherubai to the planet Hirobeel to battle the Malignoids, an alien bug-like army sent by Maligna, pulling the franchise into full cosmic warfare. What began as a straightforward children's adaptation of a cartoon quietly became the most thematically ambitious branch of the entire 1987 animated lineage, proving that the Turtles could carry serious ideas about ecology and conflict without losing their audience. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Volume 3, Image Comics. The Turtles were licensed to Image Comics for the series Urban Legends, which ran for 23 issues, placing them inside the same publisher that housed Spawn and Saga. The Mirage Studios TMNT series had already cross-pollinated with the Image universe through crossovers with Eric Larson's Savage Dragon and Todd McFarlane's Spawn, establishing a precedent for the kind of tonal and visual reinvention that Image's creators would bring to their own TMNT volume. Image Comics is home of Spawn and Saga, and the studio's design philosophy has always favored bold visual identities that differentiate each title sharply from the rest of the line. The new designs for the Turtles in this volume were drastic, changing their appearance so completely that they looked almost unrecognizable alongside their Mirage counterparts, and the series adopted a darker, harsher tone that pushed the violence and moral ambiguity further than any previous TMNT comic had attempted. Nobody investigated whether these changes were sustainable. The new designs were built specifically for Image Comics readers, not for fans of the original Mirage run, and the entire series was designed to feel like it belonged to the Image universe first and the TMNT franchise second, which is exactly what it was. Ninja Turtles, The Next Mutation, with Haim Saban and Lance H. Robbins as executive producers, originating from the United States and Canada as a joint production. In The Next Mutation, and After That Victory, and. The Next Mutation is the only live-action television series in the TMNT franchise. The series, positioning as a direct live-action follow-up to the film series, set several years after TMNT 3 and featuring the Turtles at 18 years old, reads like a mandate to differentiate from every prior adaptation at the structural level. And Venus de Milo as a fifth Turtle is the most radical revision of the core roster the franchise has ever attempted. The character was abandoned immediately after the series cancellation and never appeared again. Prince of All Media as a pirate radio show broadcasting from a jeep, and Dragonlord as a secondary antagonist arriving only after Shredder's swift defeat suggests a series that kept introducing new complications even after its central conflict had already been resolved. The franchise has attempted live-action television multiple times across its history and sustained none of them, a pattern that exposes the fundamental difficulty of translating these characters to a weekly episodic live-action format while preserving the specific energy that makes them work as a concept.